You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. Susan Miller didn't have a particular passion for cultivating the land, but the 600 square meters of their dacha plot didn't cause her rejection either. Her character possessed a yielding quality, especially when it concerned the welfare of those dear to her. Truth be told, the dacha was her mother's domain. But since Sue adored her mother immensely, she had long ago found her own charm in trips to their modest little farm. Fortunately, the dacha wasn't located too far from their city dwelling. If walking lightly, the journey took little more than half an hour. And, for example, on summer weekends, while the morning air still held its coolness, a walk could be quite pleasant. However, there was no need for forced marches on foot. Public transport came to the rescue. An unusually long bus route passed by the dacha community, connecting the railway station with a large industrial enterprise almost on the very edge of the city. Such proximity proved truly salvific in the past years, which were especially harsh for the whole country, and doubly so for their family. Whether it was a confluence of circumstances or a consequence of the misfortunes that befell them, the mother's quarrel with the father ended with his departure and filing for divorce. All his numerous relatives, previously frequent guests in their hospitable apartment, where the grandmother and grandfather also lived, seemed to have forgotten the way to their doorstep. Once the girl happened to overhear an adult conversation and understood that her father had not only kept the car and garage for himself, but also wouldn't have minded getting his hands on part of the other property. However, his plans were not destined to come true. Both the dacha and the apartment had been allocated to the grandmother, so after the divorce, the greedy former son-in-law did not get an inch. The offended man paid meager alimony and did not seek meetings with Sue, erasing her from his life as if he had never had a daughter. The girl was truly, bitterly sad, to the point of tears. But she understood that her weeping would darken the lives of her loved ones, and so she carefully concealed her sorrow. The family, suddenly reduced to Sue, her mother, Grandma Betty, and Grandpa Paul, had to live on. Trips to the little farm and the battle for the harvest became, perhaps, the most effective way to survive the hardships. On the 600 square meters, they cultivated potatoes, cucumbers, and carrots. Since there was no longer a car, transporting the harvest home without a bus would have become a serious problem. But this way, they managed to bring back even tomatoes, which didn't always have time to ripen red in the fleeting summer heat. The green fruits, after simple kitchen processing, turned into a wonderful salad that enlivened the meager menu. Under the careful guidance of Grandma Betty and her mother Susie, still very young in those years, grated carrots for the salad and sang a simple song about an evergreen tomato and the wonderful land of Lamonia. Recalling the past, the woman was amazed at the inexhaustible optimism shown by the adults in her family even in the darkest times. Soon after her parents' divorce, a period of real poverty set in. Her father, having completely stopped even paying alimony, disappeared from his daughter's life. Several years after the separation, the grandmother, grandfather, and mother all worked at the same factory, and as if by cruel fate, the wages there were delayed, and for a long time. After several months, their modest savings melted away. Sue understood that her relatives were protecting her, trying to shield her from the burden of adult problems. However, it was impossible not to notice the disappearance of store-bought sweets from their table, and even her favorite cheap sausage, which curled into a bizarre funnel when boiled. Striving to be useful, Sue ran around the dodgy corners of the district, collecting empty bottles in a bag sewn by her grandmother. Then the girl soaked the fines, knowing that they paid a little more for clean glass containers at the collection point, and with the money earned, she bought bread or something else necessary for the house. For a short period, there were difficulties with transport. Buses stopped running on schedule due to a sharp reduction in their number on the route. As a result, squeezing into a crowded bus with bags became an almost impossible task. Then Grandpa Paul constructed 2 convenient, maneuverable carts. The man most often transported the bags, especially the larger ones, himself. And when for some reason he couldn't go to the dacha, he would certainly instruct them, "Girls, when you walk home from the little farm, don't overload the cart. Take care not to strain yourselves." It sounded very touching and tender. The smaller cart was usually managed by Sue's mother, and when the load was small, she entrusted it to her daughter. Thus, together and caring for each other, they overcame all difficulties. By the time she received her passport, Sue had managed to harbor resentment towards almost the entire male sex, and taking her mother's maiden name, became Miller after her grandfather. Only he was a true support in their small family, inventive, optimistic, and approaching even the most difficult situations with humor. Grandpa Paul always managed to do everything and never once reproached his daughter Mary for not saving her marriage. Lately, Sue often thought about how her parents separated when her mother was about the same age as she was now. In some ways, their fates were similar. Susan's marriage also collapsed, like a sandcastle under the onslaught of rolling waves. However, she and her husband Ethan had no children. At first, by mutual agreement, although Sue was already 26, they decided to live for themselves. Then, Ethan suddenly became sharply engrossed in his career race, and it turned out that he, successful and driven, was intercepted by a colleague, equally energetic and shrewd. 3 years of a calm and outwardly prosperous marriage proved defenseless against a sudden passionate infatuation. However, Sue did not consider this turn of fate a tragedy. Almost 2 years had passed since the quite civilized divorce, and perhaps not even a slight regret remained. Sue's mother had it incomparably harder. A child, even one entering the difficult age of adolescence, had to be raised, clothed, and fed, and the times were troubled back then. Although it was tough then, Sue's memories of the first 15 years of her life are more often colored with light sadness. After all, Grandpa Paul and Grandma Betty were alive then. Their family dealt with troubles together. Financially, it was much easier now, and Sue was incredibly sorry that they didn't see how both their daughter and granddaughter were living quite well, even excellently. However, sometimes it seemed to her, especially at the dacha, that both her grandmother and grandfather were very close. As if just now, from somewhere beside the little house, she would hear her grandmother's affectionate voice. "Susie, run here. The raspberries are ripe. Come and have a treat." Or Grandpa would enter the gate, smiling with a triumphant look, displaying a string of caught fish and asking his wife, daughter, and granddaughter, "Well now, my nearly ladies, what would you like for dinner today? Shall I whip up some fish soup, or would you prefer fried fish?" Ah, how many pleasant things were connected with the little farm. Now the dacha had partly lost its role as a food base. The potato patch had shrunk to a few bushes, just enough to traditionally taste young boiled tubers with dill, and had given way to flower beds. Of course, space for tomatoes and cucumbers remained, but mostly now, the main harvest consisted of fruits and berries. However, the most important thing was that on the small plot, where probably every handful of earth was familiar, it was easy to find peace mixed with a light sadness. Sue's mother also enjoyed going to the dacha, but for 2 weeks now, at her daughter's insistence, she had been resting at a sanatorium. The trials she had faced in her youth had taken their toll. Yesterday, on the phone, her mother asked her to pick berries, water the beds, and deal with the surely overgrown weeds, and Sue immediately allocated the second half of Wednesday for a trip to the dacha. She asked for time off work early, as there were no urgent matters, and set off. Sue picked the currants, weeded the cultivated plants a little, watered the beds, and filled the containers with water. Tired, she snacked on a bun she had thoughtfully brought, made some berry drink, the best remedy, far superior to any sweet cold drink, for combating heat and fatigue. She lay down for a short rest and unexpectedly fell asleep. Susan's awakening was sudden. The transition from summer twilight to velvety night is, of course, pleasant, but only when there is time to enjoy it. Now, this luxury was unavailable to the woman. The clock on her smartphone screen mockingly reminded her that she needed to hurry, otherwise the last scheduled bus would leave for home without her. In that case, she was left with either a walk at a less than ideal time, or spending the night at the dacha and rushing home on the morning bus, leaving the collected harvest there, and flying to work on the wings of responsibility. Sue quickly packed the collected harvest into a bag and hurried to the bus stop. The woman was in a hurry, and seeing a fragile girl sitting on a flower bed made from a huge tire near one of the plots, she walked past. Susan took a few steps, but a vague realization prevented her from going further. A child of elementary school age had no business being alone on the street. Sue had known the Carpenters, the owners of that plot, since they acquired it, so she could say for sure that she had never seen this little girl with them. Of course, the girl might have been visiting and just gone out for a walk, but the dark windows of the Carpenters' house clearly indicated it was empty, or everyone there was asleep, having forgotten about the little guest who had gone for a walk. The second assumption was clearly absurd. Therefore, she was unlikely to be related to the owners of the plot near which she was sitting. Even in the dim light of the street lamps dispelling the darkness in the dacha community, the girl's unhappy appearance testified that she was in some difficult life situation. Of course, Sue became worried. Maybe this supposedly chance meeting was part of some scam? She had recently read a story online on her way home from work about a man who, due to his kindness, almost got into a lot of trouble and only miraculously escaped a trap set by criminals. No! The woman resolutely dismissed the suspicion of the girl's involvement in fraud. Of course, the possibility of a criminal background to her appearance in the dacha community remained, and Susan's sensitive intuition literally screamed, "This little stranger needs help." Mentally scolding herself for excessive curiosity and interfering in other people's affairs, the woman turned around and asked, "Are you waiting for someone or are you lost?" The girl started and rattled off. "Excuse me, but I need help. I got on the bus. There were a lot of people. I wanted to pay for my fare, but my wallet wasn't in my bag. My school bus pass was in there and money. Even my phone was taken. It's a simple button phone, but it's still upsetting. I tried to explain to the conductor that it was probably stolen. They took everything of any value from me. She got angry and told me to walk. So I'm walking here. I turned into the dacha area to wait out the heat. I tried asking for money, but no one is giving any." Sue sat down next to the girl on the tire and clarified, "Where do you need to go?" Judging by the address the girl gave, she needed to get on a bus going to the city center, just like Susan herself. The woman didn't hesitate for long and commanded, "All right then, let's go quickly. I'll pay for your fare." The girl was incredibly happy, and taking one of the bags of berries from Susan to help, talked non-stop on the way to the bus stop, expressing her gratitude. Soon, the woman and the girl were sitting in the stuffy bus, and the stranger asked, "Could you please tell me your phone number? I'll remember it and then I'll return everything to you." Susan looked closely at her companion. Her initial assumption that she was about 7 years old was wrong. Judging by her thoughtfulness and how the girl formed her sentences, she was clearly older. The woman smiled. "Don't worry, I won't go broke from buying one ticket. By the way, what's your name?" The girl introduced herself. "Olivia, Liv." "Very nice to meet you." "Well, I'm Susan. There, we've met. Listen, maybe we should inform your family that you're all right. Are you going home?" Liv looked sad and admitted, "Thank you, but I don't remember my mom's phone number by heart." The woman noticed that her companion, apparently tired from the day's experiences, was either falling asleep or emerging from its sweet captivity, and offered her shoulder. "Don't be shy. Rest. I'll wake you up before your stop." The girl, desperately suppressing a yawn, asked again, "Do you have to go even further?" Susan nodded. She didn't want to make the girl feel awkward by explaining that she had decided to accompany her all the way home and hand her over to her relatives. The area Liv was heading to was too questionable, although it was in the center. Old houses, sunk into the ground, stood next to rising high-rises, and residents, as reported by the media, were being relocated to wonderful districts. The city dwellers, of course, understood that the former residents of the center were ending up literally on the outskirts, and the most unyielding were even being pushed towards disadvantageous relocation through seemingly accidental, unfortunate circumstances. Wooden houses regularly flared up like matches, clearing space with minimal costs for developers. Sometimes, driving past, Sue noticed that many buildings were empty, or, most likely, served as a refuge for antisocial elements and hooligans. Of course, the woman was anxious, but it was completely unwise for a girl to walk the streets of this area alone at such a late hour. Liv trustingly leaned against her unexpected patroness's shoulder. Driving past her own stop, Susan sighed, realizing that because of her kind impulse, she wouldn't be home anytime soon. And, after sending her mother a text message wishing her good night, she thought about everything and nothing. Thoughts about work were replaced by reflections on the need to arrange her personal life, and then moved on to thoughts about how, with the established heat, the plantings at the dacha would have a hard time by Friday. Finally, the bus took Sue and Liv to the right stop, and after a short walk down the almost unlit street, the girl stopped at a dilapidated house. The girl didn't even have time to get out her key when the door burst open. A woman in a stretched-out tank top and tight cycling shorts came out onto the threshold and started shouting, "What are you doing, Olivia? Where's the money your father gave you? I called him and I know you left him, and I already thought you'd made off with the loot and run away. I was thinking of filing a missing person report." Behind the screaming woman appeared thin children, a girl about Liv's age, a slightly younger boy, and a tiny baby crawling after the older ones. Liv began to stammeringly explain the situation she had found herself in, and Susan froze, unable to utter a word or even move. The stunned woman wanted to turn around and leave. Her feet seemed rooted to the asphalt in amazement. The lady scolding Liv was perfectly familiar to Sue. It was her former best friend and now, for many years, her sworn enemy, Beth Gordon. Many years ago, she had separated Sue from Dan, her first strong love. Now, with the wisdom of her age, the woman understood that she shouldn't have shared all her personal secrets with Elizabeth. But back then, not yet 16, she believed in unbreakable friendship and was also too shy to discuss overly sensitive topics with her mother and grandmother. Beth learned from Sue herself that Dan was insisting on intimacy, arguing that they would definitely get married as soon as his beloved girl turned 18. So what difference did it make when they became intimate? Sue was almost in agreement. The guy's arguments seemed very convincing, and the girl was ready to forget all the moral principles instilled in her by her older relatives. She constantly sang, both aloud and mentally, a naive popular song about a plane in love, because the words of this simple hit so accurately told her story. "I love you, Danny," Sue repeated after the vocalist again and again. The girl wanted the guy not to doubt her feelings. The only hitch was the desire to make the first time something special and the girl's overly long preparation for such an important moment. It just turned out that while she was doubting and planning, Beth was acting. As a result, Dan, who came for a date, announced to Sue with a little embarrassment that he was breaking up with her. "Understand, it's not about you. You're a great person, and you'll easily find your happiness." He said something else in a similar vein, but the girl seemed not to hear him, and then turned around and ran, not noticing the puddles under her feet. Naturally, Sue rushed to Beth with her trouble, hoping for support and perhaps even advice on how to get the guy back. But instead of words of sympathy, she heard the cruel, merciless truth. "Susie, Danny and I are together now. It just happened that I'm expecting his child. Don't be offended, okay?" After such a statement, it was as if all of Susan's upbringing evaporated. She would later hardly be able, even if she wanted to recall a tenth of what she said to her friend, who instantly became her ex. However, simply forgetting the people who stabbed her in the back like a terrible nightmare, that was all she dreamed of. Fortunately, Dan's father was a military man. Thanks to this, the traitors didn't bother Sue's eyes for long with a clearly visible baby bump on an otherwise slender figure. Beth left after the guy, who became her legal husband. Sue moved on with her life, trying not to remember the arrogant traitor and the treacherous friend. For a long time, she didn't let men get close to her. With the fairer sex, besides her mother and grandmother, she interacted exclusively dryly and only on business. Susan calculated. 15 years had passed since that bitter year for her, 1997. That's how long she hadn't seen either Beth or Dan, and deliberately changed the subject when any mutual acquaintances started talking about them. Beth's mother, Aunt Kate, accidentally met Sue on the street once and tried to talk to her. However, the proud girl said she had to run. Aunt Kate later, according to rumors, went to live with her daughter, but Susan didn't care, as long as she never saw or heard about the traitors again. The girl suffered, experiencing everything deeply inside, and only her future husband Ethan was able to slightly melt the ice in her heart. He won her over with his politeness, care, and ability to discuss various topics. Susan reciprocated his courtship, but, however, she herself understood that the emergence of sympathy was also influenced by the fear of remaining an old maid. It was no joke to say that more than 10 years had passed since the betrayal. Sue probably married Ethan only because he was the antithesis of Dan, both in appearance and character, but still, their life together didn't work out. Susan wanted to leave unnoticed, but suddenly Beth shifted her attention from the nearly crying Liv to her and shouted no less loudly, though more joyfully, "Suey, damn! Exactly, Suey, it's you. I was looking and thinking. Kind of yes, kind of no. Holy cow! You're a good girl, you've hardly changed, just your eyes look a bit tired. Why are you hovering at the door like a stranger? Come in." Almost knocking over Liv, who was standing in front of Sue, Beth grabbed her old acquaintance by the wrist, since she had bags in her hands, and pulled her inside the house. Come in quickly. Let's sit and talk. We haven't seen each other in so many years. As you can see, I already have 4 children. How about you?" Susan was in shock because she suddenly realized Beth felt not even a shadow of shame for what had happened between them in the past. "What are you staring at?" the hostess snapped at her older children. "Max, take Alice to the nursery and put her in the playpen. Claire, Olivia, hurry to the kitchen. Quickly peel the potatoes, put the water on the stove. We'll talk later, Olivia. You'll answer for the money you wasted. Just look at that. I sent you on such an important task like an adult, and you ruined everything. So now you'll be eating potatoes and pasta." No matter how Susan tried to explain to her sworn friend that she had no time, that she had to go home, her words seemed not to reach Beth. As soon as the peeled tubers were in the boiling water, the mother snapped at her older ones. "All right, clear out of here quickly. Sit in the nursery and don't make a sound. Don't interrupt Susie and me talking." "See," Beth turned to her guest, 4 children, and I have to be a commander, otherwise there'll be no peace from them. On top of everything else, they're also different ages. Claire is 14, Olivia is 12, Maxie is 5, and Lizzie will be almost 2 soon. They all need different supervision. The atmosphere in the kitchen was not very pleasant and not conducive to conversation. Although Sue was not a spoiled, refined young lady and could easily live in a much smaller space, she felt terribly uncomfortable here. Dirty dishes were piled up in the sink and on the table. A sour smell evoked unpleasant associations with a full garbage can, which seemed to be somewhere in the kitchen. Catching the glances of her unexpected guest, the hostess explained, "The water pipe was damaged because of the construction next door, so I'm waiting for them to fix it. Then I'll make Claire and Olivia wash everything. Otherwise, to cook and wash our hands, we carry water from the pump on the next street." Hypnotized, Sue sat on an uncomfortable stool and looked at Beth, not understanding how she had turned from a real beauty into a vulgar woman of the most common type. The woman laughed loudly, throwing her head back, and talked breathlessly. "Oh, Suey, you should be grateful to me for the rest of your life for getting rid of such a gift as Danny. I thought his father was military. He'd retire soon after his years of service. They'd give him an apartment, and we'd settle down somewhere nice. Everything was so neat in my plans. But Danny managed to have a big fight with his father. As a result, with a baby, Claire wasn't even 6 months old, when we ended up in a rented room. Danny got stressed, started drinking, even cheated. What can I say? We rushed into starting a family. We were completely green. In bed, it was still okay, somehow normal, but there was nothing to talk about. Danny seemed to even treat me with contempt, first hinted, and then started saying directly that I had brazenly trapped him, tied his hands and feet completely, as if he were a dog on a leash, going wherever he was pulled. Susan, utterly surprised, didn't even know what to say to such revelations. But Elizabeth apparently just needed to talk. She continued her speech, not noticing that her guest was completely uncomfortable listening to her. Anyway, pretty soon, out of boredom and in revenge, I started having fun with the neighbor. It seemed like everything was going well, but then somehow we got caught. Danny got nervous and started throwing punches at me. My lover, sensing that things were getting hot, bolted from the room so fast his heels were sparking. Danny filed for divorce, and I didn't resist. He turned out not to be so good after all. All I could get from him was alimony. He has to pay for both Claire and Olivia, who was supposedly conceived within the marriage. Honestly, I don't even know who she is. As luck would have it, I'm having temporary problems with my card. I sent that idiot out for cash today. She lost it all, and even lost her phone. Maxie and Alice are from my current husband, but he's pretty much useless. Doesn't show up at home for days. When he does come, there's not much joy either. But they promised to give us a new apartment soon. We just moved here recently, sort of followed Danny here to get all sorts of extra bonuses besides alimony. He's well set up, the scoundrel. Found himself a woman who got him a cushy job. The official salary is peanuts, though, but he gets a great amount in cash every month under the table. I know this for sure because an acquaintance works at the same company. Anyway, Danny is supposedly not against helping voluntarily, but he avoids it in every way. So I have to send the girls to him. He melts when they start begging him. Of course, I rushed things. Basically gave birth to Claire and Olivia for free. But with Maxie, it worked out perfectly. As if they specifically came up with this maternity capital thing for him. It's a pity, of course, that it's not cash in hand, but at least something from a lousy, excuse my language, sheep, at least a lock of wool. Beth, looking around, didn't see any other clean dishes except for a tray with a decorative samovar on it. She quickly moved it onto the dirty floor and transferred the cooked potatoes into the empty improvised plate. After that, with a practiced, deft movement, she took disposable cups from the cupboard, clearly used many times, and poured a cloudy liquid from a bottle into them. Don't be squeamish, Suey. This is a drink made by my man. I vouch for the quality. It drinks like water, and your head won't ache in the morning. We'll have a shot now, and you'll tell me how you're living, what you're interested in, where you work. Why am I talking all about myself? Listen, do you have children? By your figure, it looks like you don't. But don't delay. I'm only half a year older than you, and you see what a set I have. Well, aren't I a good girl? Without waiting for her guest's answer, Beth confirmed, Of course I'm a good girl. Don't think I'm boasting. You just have to praise yourself. It's necessary, absolutely necessary to praise yourself. That's it. I made it in time. Look there. Claire is almost a bride already, and I'm still quite young. Isn't that cool? And it's time for you, Suey. It's time to have children. Your biological clock is ticking. And before you know it, old age will be at your doorstep. And you're all alone. So hurry up and find a man and have kids. Or if you want, I'll call Danny right now and tell him you need help with such a sensitive matter. I think he won't refuse. He'll help. And then he won't interfere. The child will be only yours, with no claims from him. Otherwise, his shrew of a wife will quickly deal with him. And Danny isn't stupid enough to ruin a profitable marriage. Well, shall I call? Sue felt murky inside, both from the unsolicited advice and the questionable offer, and generally from the unwelcome meeting with the brazen, unprincipled Beth. How dare she even give advice, living almost like a neglectful woman in this absolute pigsty? Sue physically felt like she was suffocating in this environment and, as if waking from a trance, wanted to tell her former friend everything she thought. However, she was interrupted by Liv's timid voice from behind her. Mom, can I set aside some potatoes for us? Max is asking for food, and I haven't eaten anything substantial since morning. Susan got up from the stool, freeing up the space. Thanks for the offer, Beth, but I really have to go. Besides, your children probably need to go to bed too. Beth was clearly unhappy that her second daughter had interrupted their chat. Sue noticed that her former friend was barely restraining herself from swearing. Near the threshold stood the bags with the harvest collected at the dacha. Feeling a strange sense of pity, Sue took out the small bag with her keys and wallet lying on the side and announced, These, Beth, are vitamins for your children. Goodbye. The woman left her former friend's house and, reaching the next one, leaned against a tree growing on the sidewalk. Memories surged like dirty waves, filling her thoughts. How she hated Elizabeth and Dan then, wishing them all the worst. Now, by chance, she had been able to see how the betrayer was living, but she felt no joy. She felt sorry primarily for the children, and, to be honest, even for Dan and Beth, for whom she had once invented the most agonizing punishments. "Susan!" Liv, who had caught up with her, called out to the woman. "You didn't tell me your number. Please, here's a piece of paper and a pen. Write it down for me." Although Sue had no desire to talk to anyone connected to Beth, she, tired and emotionally drained, complied with the girl's request. Liv smiled, her white teeth flashing in the dim light, and asked, "Can I call you sometimes when I get my phone back?" Sue nodded and advised, "Run home. You've had a difficult day, eat something and go to bed." The girl waved and ran home. Sue waited until the door closed behind Liv and hurried to her own place. The late hour left no chance that public transport was still running on the city streets. She had to get away from the construction-filled area quickly and hurry to get to her own apartment to finally rest from the unexpected events. Surprisingly, the woman reached home calmly, as if a guardian angel had spread its wings over her, and after taking a shower, she went to bed. Whether it was nervous tension or the prolonged rest at the dacha, sleep was slow to come to Susan. She counted sheep and used other techniques, but nothing helped. Events of the past floated in her memory, mixing together. The woman couldn't understand if Beth felt no remorse at all for crossing the line of decency back then. Of course, it was impossible to say how her relationship with Dan would have turned out, but there was still a possibility that it would have been quite successful. Maybe they would have had children. A separate cause for concern was the fact that the traders now lived in the same city as her. Although it was large, the probability of a chance meeting increased. Why on earth did I stay late at the dacha, and then notice a sad girl and help her? If I had known beforehand whose daughter Liv was, I would have walked past or just given her money for a ticket. It's true, no good deed goes unpunished. Accompanied by such thoughts, stinging, uncomfortable, provocative, Sue finally fell into a restless sleep. The early summer morning still indulged in coolness, but it seemed the day was going to be hot again. Thanks to the sudden work troubles, Susan didn't even remember the meeting the day before. But in the evening, during her traditional phone call with her mother, sadness washed over the woman again. Not immediately, and softening the impression of meeting her former friend a little, she told her everything. Mary was categorical. "Daughter, you have grown into a wonderful, merciful person. But remember that when you extend a helping hand, it's important to dodge the kick of gratitude in time. Susie, I simply beg you, don't feel sorry for that Beth. She chose her own fate. It's not your fault that she now has 4 children. You left them berries, and that's enough acts of support from you. You shouldn't feel sorry for Beth even for the sake of the children. They are, of course, not to blame for anything. But you must stay away from such sworn friends for your own happiness. If I understand anything in life, it's unlikely she could have changed for the better. Forget about her and don't remember her. And if she shows up, send her away with a broom. It's a pity, of course, that you gave her daughter your phone number, but I understand you. You were tired, flustered. However, it's nothing. If Beth has the audacity to call, you'll block her number, and that's all there is to it. The less you communicate with such people, the better. You can't expect anything good from treacherous betrayers." Susan promised her mother that she would under no circumstances respond favorably to Beth's attempts to reconnect, and she calmed down a little. In reality, her own conscience, Sue's, was clear. She helped the girl selflessly, from the heart, and that was that. Perhaps if she had known that by accompanying her home, she would run into her former friend, she would have parted with the girl, by the way, at the corner of the street and just watched her go in. However, everything happened as it happened, and that means there is no need to speculate about how it would have been if this or that had happened. Moreover, this act does not place any responsibility for Beth's children on her. She, Sue, is not an angel, not a saint, and not a blessed one. She will certainly not be able to mercifully forgive a betrayal even 15 years old. She doesn't intend to seek revenge either. There's no need to dirty her hands or conscience. And honestly, it's over now. At first, the pain was so bad she could barely breathe, but she endured, survived, rebuilt herself, metaphorically pulling herself out from under the wreckage of a great and bright love on her part. Now, she has no desire to communicate with dishonest people who have unexpectedly emerged from the past. Sue's mother returned from the sanatorium, and everything in the small, friendly Miller family went back to normal. The sincere joy of meeting a loved one was mutual. Together, the women celebrated this not very large but important event at their beloved dacha, and life continued according to the long-established routine. The rest of the summer passed calmly. For a while, the woman answered calls from unknown numbers with apprehension, fearing she would hear Liv's voice, but then this fear also subsided. Golden autumn generously delighted them with a harvest of apples, and to Sue's great joy, neither Beth nor Dan appeared on the horizon. With some trepidation, the woman walked past the plot near which she had once met the sworn friend's daughter, but then this feeling also remained in the past, especially after Sue met Alex. It happened near the bus stop. A man in a simple domestic car slowed down, seeing two women dragging carts too slowly, and offered them a ride. If Mary hadn't felt a bit unwell that evening due to the change in weather turning towards real autumn, she would surely have found a reason to refuse such kindness. However, Susan took responsibility for the answer, and, thanking the driver for his consideration, helped her mother get into the car. By this time, the bags were already in the trunk, carefully placed there by the kind-hearted man. On the way, the driver introduced himself, and even, taking a wrist blood pressure monitor from the glove compartment, handed it to Mary. "Just in case, measure your pressure. Maybe it makes sense to stop by a hospital or pharmacy." The readings were quite acceptable. The man, after asking for the address of his new acquaintances, soon drove Mary and Sue to their building entrance and then helped them carry the bags up to the apartment. Alex refused the offered tea but gratefully accepted a bag of apples. In addition, the man asked Sue for her phone number. They started dating, and Alex gradually became one of the family in the small female kingdom. He helped as much as he could both at the dacha and in the apartment, although both Mary and Sue tried not to burden him with problems. However, he categorically rejected their attempts to pay him for the work. Mary was only wary of the fact that the man spoke very sparingly about himself. Alex described his life in dotted lines, schematically and without details. Born in one of the Soviet republics, and then forced to leave with his family, trained as a car mechanic, got a job, then was drafted for compulsory service, served in a hot spot, returned, married, divorced, no children, works, lives in a rented apartment, but is already looking for an apartment for a mortgage. As soon as Alex was asked about his relatives, he shut down and asked, "Let's talk about all that when I'm ready. I'll tell you myself." Thus, Sue, unrestrained in her fantasies, decided that a terrible tragedy had happened in Alex's past, which was still painful and difficult for him to remember. Mary felt a slight distrust towards the new acquaintance. He had found common ground with her daughter too easily. Alex liked the same music and films as Sue. He could easily finish a sentence she started, and often completely agreed with any opinion she expressed. The man did not rush things, but at the same time, he became more and more firmly established in Sue's life. It reached the point where he drove her to work, brought her home, and transported her to and from the dacha. At first, Mary accepted the man benevolently, but gradually gratitude for the help was replaced by wariness. Alex began to seem too smooth to her, excessively polite, always neat, and without the slightest signs of working in a car service. She never saw traces on his hands like her former husband's, and his desire to constantly keep track of all of Sue's movements caused a burning feeling of anxiety. One day, Mary decided to share her suspicions with her daughter. "Susie, listen to me calmly. Alex is somehow too positive. Everything seems smooth and consistent. But think for yourself. When does he manage to work if he's practically become your personal driver? And on a voluntary basis. Forgive me, but I don't believe in altruism in the modern world at all. Maybe you're secretly giving him money, for gas at least?" Sue was even a little offended. "And what? Is it not an option for him to just drive me around free of charge simply because he likes me?" After a pause, the young woman tried to soften the sharpness of her remark and, as if surprised, admitted, "Actually, Mom, I offered Alex to cover the expenses, but he flatly refused. I think you're just worrying unnecessarily. Haven't you and I deserved to meet a good, selfless person?" Mary herself wanted to believe in a miracle, but she tried to convince her daughter not to rush into opening her heart completely to Alex. "That's right. You definitely deserve happiness. But don't rush. Think it over calmly yourself. After all, Alex doesn't show any details about his life, any emotions about past or present situations. When I start asking him questions, he avoids answering or says what we've already heard from him, like an actor who has memorized his role and sticks to it without any improvisation. He hasn't lost his temper once, hasn't said anything unnecessary." "Okay, I understand. It might be hard to remember military actions, but why is he so reserved about everything else?" Sue just winced at such complaints. "Mom, you're impossible to please. Remember, about Ethan, you told me he was too talkative, too shifty. Alex is reserved, taciturn, and still it's not right for you." Mary herself was not happy that she had started such a conversation with her daughter, and certainly did not expect it to lead to a quarrel that would shatter their mutual understanding, which had previously seemed unshakable. Susan went to her room, indicating that she had no intention of continuing the conversation. And her mother thought, maybe she really wasn't completely objective about Alex. Indeed, isn't there a possibility that he is a man of action and not inclined to talk about himself? And did her suspicions arise from maternal jealousy? No, Mary decided. I will no longer interfere in my daughter's relationship with her chosen one. However, I will watch him carefully so as not to miss any warning signs. So what if Susie has entered her 4th decade? For me, she will always remain my beloved little girl whom I will always protect. The woman's doubts did not disappear, but now she stopped bothering her daughter with her conjectures. However Mary felt about Alex, she couldn't deny that preparing the dacha for winter would have been much more difficult without his help. The man diligently carried out all requests and even made some quite reasonable suggestions himself. He clearly had experience with such work. But Alex again elegantly evaded answering the question of where he had learned all the intricacies of dacha management. About a week before New Year's Eve, the man brought a slender fir tree with fluffy short needles to the miller's apartment, explaining, "I thought that you grow all sorts of flowers yourselves at the dacha, and it would be silly to give you Dutch counterparts, and this seems more thematic." Sue, placing the fragrant beauty in a free corner, asked, "And actually, what's the need to give flowers today, which are, of course, less impressive than a fir tree?" A hint of offense even sounded in Alex's voice. "What, Susie? Don't you remember that today marks exactly 3 months since the day we met so accidentally, but so happily? It became a very important event for me." Susan even felt ashamed. "Forgive me, Alex, we have a complete rush at work before the new year, so it completely slipped my mind. You're not offended, are you?" The man smiled and admitted, "Not at all. I read somewhere that offense is for chambermaids. So, my dear, I'm not even annoyed. In fact, I just wanted to do something nice for you, and since I came across a Christmas tree market on the way, I thought a tree would be perfect." Mary, listening to the conversation between her daughter and her suitor, felt ashamed of her doubts about Alex. He spoke very unconvincingly. Besides, the man readily agreed to spend the holiday together with Sue and her mother. Mary's suspicions that Alex was married were partly dismissed. How could a married man so easily free himself from the obligation of being at home with relatives at a set table? Hardly. On the holiday evening, Alex gave Mary a beautiful shawl in the Pavlovsky Posad style and presented Sue with perfume. 15 minutes before midnight, the man asked for a little attention and delivered an unusually long speech for him. "Dear Mary and Susan, in the past year, the most significant event for me was the chance meeting with you. I think it was the greatest luck of my life. In essence, only thanks to you did I understand what real family support and the warmth of a home hearth mean. I would like Sue to enter the coming year in a new status. Excuse me, I'm nervous." The man cleared his throat and then addressed Sue's mother. "Mary, I ask for your daughter's hand. Believe me, she will have no reason to be dissatisfied with me. Do you object?" Mary looked questioningly at her daughter, into her happy eyes that sparkled brighter than the lights on the Christmas tree, and shrugged. I think, Alex, you should ask her too. No, however she decides, that's how it will be. Alex nodded in agreement with the woman's words, took a box from his pocket, opened it, and showed it to Susan. Allow me to put it on you as a sign of our engagement. Sue smiled timidly, extending her hand to the man, and a touched Mary wiped the corners of her eyes, trying not to smudge her mascara. At the holiday table, Alex began to suggest options for the celebration. I think it makes sense to choose a wedding date closer to summer. We could sit in a cafe and then go relax at your wonderful dacha, Mary, which partly led to our acquaintance. After that, honestly, I'd like to go somewhere by the sea for a week or two. What do you think about that, Sue? Will you be able to get time off work in the summer? Susan beamed and was already mentally calculating which period to ask her boss for. And then she suddenly remembered, Mom, how will you manage the dacha in my absence? Mary waved her hands. Don't you worry. The dacha should be a pleasure, not a chore. Plan your celebration however it suits you. By the way, Alex, we should probably inform your relatives about such an important event, and it wouldn't hurt to meet them in general. It was evident from Alex's sharply saddened face that Mary had touched a sore spot, but he replied, Alas, I have no one to introduce you to. Forgive me, but this is a somewhat painful topic for me. I'll go get some air on the landing. The man left the table, and Sue whispered indignantly to her mother, Why did you spoil Alex's mood? Everything was so wonderful. It seems he has some unpleasant memories related to the loss of loved ones. We talked about this before, didn't we? Mary began to apologize. Daughter, but I didn't mean to offend Alex. That's it. I won't ask another single question, don't worry. When Alex returned to the table, he behaved as if nothing had happened, and the holiday returned to a pleasant course. By joint decision, they decided to get married in the spring, in April, and postpone the honeymoon until the velvet season. The days of the new year flew by. Alex even started taking Sue to view apartments. However, among the abundance of options, they couldn't find the perfect one. Mary was happy for her daughter, but made another attempt to check Alex's identity. The man's social media page was boring and devoid of any hints about his relatives. He posted photos of cars he had repaired and reposted contest entries. The woman noticed nothing objectionable and calmly began preparing for her daughter's upcoming wedding. One day, Alex, as usual, picked up Sue after work, and the woman noticed that her fiancé was even more taciturn than usual. Observing him from the passenger seat, she saw how the man's brows were furrowed and how his jaw muscles twitched. The atmosphere in the car was tense, and, unable to bear it, the woman asked, Alex, what's going on? Did something happen? Can I help in any way? The man turned off the avenue into a shopping center parking lot, stopped the car, and turned to Sue. Alex's appearance was not at all like that of a happy groom preparing to say goodbye to bachelor life. After a pause, he spoke. Susie, I have serious problems. We might have to postpone the wedding. They? Sue asked, frightened. What happened? Alex, looking into his fiancée's eyes, shared his problems. To earn more money, in addition to my usual garage service, I started moonlighting for cash at another place. Well, last night, the boxes where cars brought in for repair were kept, to which I had access, and some I even repaired, burned down. In short, they decided to blame me for the fire. The sum I have to pay is simply astronomical. I've already given all my savings, but it's a drop in the ocean. I've been running around banks all day, but with the salary I can show officially, there are no decent offers. They are threatening to cripple me, even find other ways to pressure me. I'm terribly afraid that you or your mother might suffer because of these bastards. Susan was in shock. She had seen a report about a fire in the industrial zone on a city news website, but she couldn't have imagined that this emergency would affect her so closely. The woman soothingly stroked her fiancé's cheek and tried to say absolutely calmly, Well, that's not a disaster. We won't postpone anything. I'll transfer money from my card to you right now so you can pay off at least part of the debt. We'll go file the application exactly on the day we planned and get married without any crowds or delays. The only thing is, We'll have to sacrifice the entertainment, but that's not scary at all. We can easily do without a banquet and a trip to the sea. Life is long. We'll still have time for everything. Alex took Sue's hand and began covering it with kisses. Thank you, darling, for your support. We'll see. Maybe the insurance company will sort it out and the claims against me will be dropped. Of course, that would be the best option. Well, roughly imagining how this whole insurance business works, they will most likely refuse to pay, or it will come in several years. So it's better not to count on that to avoid disappointment. The lovers sat in the car for a little while longer, and then Alex drove his fiancée home. He flatly refused to drop by. Forgive me, my dear. I'm going to run to one more place now. Maybe I can pick up some extra work there. Every penny counts for us now. Susan smiled encouragingly, and kissing her fiancé asked, Alex, just don't overwork yourself. We'll get through this. Don't strain yourself. At home, Sue told her mother about the trouble Alex had gotten into and asked, What do you think? Maybe we should hire a lawyer to at least try to reduce the amount of damage supposedly caused by Alex. Mary was shocked. She had been so taught by her father, Sue's grandfather, that a real man tries not to burden the woman close to him with his problems. At the same time, she perfectly understood that the semi-criminal businessman Alex worked for could well use any methods, often choosing illegal but the most effective ones. For the next few days, Alex couldn't see his fiancée, which he warned her about by phone. My golden one, I was offered an excellent paying gig, but I'll have to go out of town, so forgive me. I won't be able to get away even to drive you to work and back. Sue took this with complete understanding. She was glad that her loved one had not despaired, but was trying to get out of the difficult situation. After warmly saying goodbye to Alex, she began thinking about how else she could help him. Taking advantage of the few days' respite, mother and daughter began to gather at least part of the necessary sum. They had bank accounts, and although it wasn't enough, at least the debt would gradually decrease. After withdrawing the money, the women brought it home with all necessary precautions and waited for Alex to appear. The man called a couple of days later, and Sue joyfully informed him that she and her mother had collected another part of the sum. Alex thanked her incessantly, and the woman even thought he was barely holding back tears. Susie, my beloved, how grateful I am to you and Mary. Most likely I'll be back in the city the day after tomorrow and can finally hug you. There's also an option to sell my car, and if everything goes well, we'll have a little money left for the holiday table. It won't be as luxurious a banquet as I dreamed of giving you, but still. Only after the call ended did Sue realize how much she missed her beloved. He had become necessary to her, like air, although it seemed not much time had passed since they met. Seeing that her daughter was still anxious, Mary tried to distract her thoughts to something pleasant. Listen, I have a wonderful piece of fabric tucked away. Grandma Betty got it on occasion. Let's take a look at it and think about the style of a wedding dress. Sue chuckled. Mom, I'm not getting married for the first time, you know. I don't necessarily need a white dress. Mary countered, Well, did I say the fabric was white? It's a simply wonderful turquoise shade, which I think... With worries and gentle arguments about the style, the women were somewhat distracted from unpleasant experiences. After all, when your hands and mind are busy with a creative process, everything else seems to diminish in importance. Mary went to the store when Sue's phone unexpectedly received an incoming call from an unknown number. The woman usually declined such calls and did so this time. However, the unknown caller or callers persisted. When the ringtone sounded again, Sue answered, Hello. The young voice coming from the speaker was clear but somehow joyless. Hello, Susan. It's Olivia, Beth's daughter. Can we meet somewhere crowded now so as not to attract unnecessary attention? Susan was surprised. She hadn't thought she would ever have to talk to her sworn friend's daughter again, and she replied, not very kindly, Maybe you can explain what's going on over the phone? The girl's voice turned into a whisper. I can't say this over the phone. Please, let's meet at a shopping center. Sue gave in, and soon she and Liv agreed to meet at the food court of the shopping center closest to the woman's home. Mary, who had returned home, was surprised that her daughter was going somewhere but didn't question her. In fact, Sue herself couldn't explain what force was pushing her to go to this meeting. She recognized Olivia from afar. The girl was again sitting hunched over, as on that summer evening, as if weighed down by some complex, non-childish problem. Sue walked up and greeted her. "Hi, Liv. How are things?" The girl looked up and, greeting her back, blurted out quickly, "Susan, well, there's no need to explain for long. Don't give Alex any money. He's a fraud." The woman was astonished. "Why do you think so?" Susan's eyes widened. She didn't understand what was happening at all and clarified, "Wait a minute, Liv. How do you know that Alex is asking me for money? How do you know him?" The girl looked down and then confessed, "Susan, well, I'm ashamed to admit it, but your meeting with Alex was thought up and organized by my mom. She's angry at you for some reason. Although, as I understand it, it should be the other way around. So Mom decided to profit. She said that life is bad without a sucker, and involved this Alex in carrying out her plan. He's somehow connected to my stepfather Arthur, Max and Alice's father. I don't know exactly where they met, either in an orphanage or when he served time as a minor. Anyway, I overheard this cunning scheme yesterday. Alex is supposed to swindle money out of you and disappear. He's already withdrawn the first part from his card. But they and Arthur are sure you'll be too embarrassed to go to the police. How that pig Arthur squealed yesterday when Alex told him you had prepared another sum for him. He told Alex not to rush back, supposedly so you wouldn't think he dropped everything and rushed back just for the money. I thought all night and half the day whether to tell you about this or not. And I decided to tell you. I think you don't deserve such a vile attitude. After all, you were the only one who didn't walk past me, who responded to my trouble, who treated me to delicious berries. It's wrong when good people are punished by scoundrels. What happened between my mom and you doesn't concern me. Personally, I didn't experience anything bad. And partly I even consider myself to blame for what's happening now, because Mom was only spitting at you after your meeting." The woman swallowed a lump that suddenly almost blocked her breathing and found the courage to calm the girl. "No, Liv, you are not to blame for anything. For some reason, your mother decided to make me her main enemy, and you are completely unrelated to this action of hers. Thank you very much for warning me. Otherwise, I would have been in a simply catastrophic situation, and I would have dragged my mother into it as well. You can rest assured, no one will know that I figured out Alex with your help. I promise you." Susan thanked Olivia again, and somehow, with difficulty comprehending the treachery of her former friend who harbored malice for who knows what reason, made her way home. Mary immediately understood that something terrible had happened to her daughter. She looked so lost. Sue unemotionally recounted everything she had learned about Alex, his involvement in Beth and her husband's insidious plan. Mary listened to the shocking information, pressing her palm to her mouth to keep from erupting in perfectly justified curses at the scoundrels. Such treachery was very difficult to believe. When Susan fell silent, the woman couldn't help herself. "What on earth is going on? Why is that vile Beth doing this to you? She's been doing nasty things since she was a child and isn't afraid that the boomerang for her evil deeds will come back and hit her on the head. My God, how good it is that Olivia crossed your path. Otherwise, if you had accidentally run into Beth in the city, who would have helped prevent her villainous plan?" Finally bursting into tears, Sue clung to her mother and whispered hotly, "You were right in your suspicions, and I was blinded by Alex's care and hoped that here he was, a real, reliable man with whom I could relax, remember my fragility. Even when Ethan told me he was leaving me, it didn't hurt this much. At least he honestly admitted that he loved someone else and couldn't live with me. And this swindler wormed his way into our trust for so many months, lulled our vigilance, deceived us. How can I trust people now? Oh, Mom, I don't even feel sorry for the money I immediately transferred to him when I found out about his supposed problems. I'm terribly hurt that I was so easily fooled. Why am I such a fool?" Mary, holding her daughter tightly, as in childhood, tried to speak convincingly and calmly. "People with pure souls find it hard to believe that they are surrounded by scoundrels. You are scolding yourself unnecessarily. This Alex was very convincing. Even I fell for his charms. A talent, albeit with a minus sign. You know, Let's think that the money you transferred to him is not his illegal gain, but a perfectly fair payment for services for repairing our dacha and apartment. If we look at it from this point of view, we are quite even. So you could say we got off cheaply. We learned another lesson. You have to trust your intuition. If there's the slightest suspicion, you need to check all the information more carefully. There were obvious oddities in Alex's behavior, but we preferred to ignore them. We should have insisted that he introduce you at least to his relatives, his friends. We could have gone to his workplace, visited the hostel where he lives, talked to the neighbors. Mary's reasoning was interrupted by a call. It was Alex, following his usual routine, calling Susan to wish her good night, say his usual compliments, and confess his love. Only now did the woman understand the true price of these words. It was all a lie. Contrary to habit, she didn't rush to answer the man. She simply didn't know how to live on at all, or what specifically to say to the person who had taken advantage of her trust and intended to completely fleece her. Sue was afraid that Alex would realize from her voice that he had been exposed. Mary answered instead. "Hello, Alex." Susie went out to the neighbors and forgot her phone. "Anything I should tell her?" Alex, as always, was polite and courteous. "Thank you, Mary. If possible, please ask her to call back any time she returns. I will wait. All the best. Goodbye." The woman echoed the man calling, "Goodbye." The conversation ended, and Sue looked at her mother with longing and asked, "Well, how can someone lie so skillfully? He's so polite, just flawless." I wanted to shout that they had miscalculated and wouldn't get another penny from me or you, but we have to do everything so as not to let Olivia down. Judging by how Beth can cause trouble for strangers, she won't spare her own daughter. It will be hard for her if someone figures out that she warned me. I don't want to harm such a sincere, honest girl. Mary understood that Sue wasn't expecting an answer, so she didn't rush to say anything. Indeed, they needed to think everything through carefully. The women sat embracing, as if drawing support and strength from each other to withstand the betrayal that had befallen them. Finally, Mary began to speak, carefully choosing her words. "I think you shouldn't talk to Alex on the phone today. Send a text message saying you're tired, especially since that's the pure truth, and that you'll be waiting for him here, at our place. He's supposed to come tomorrow, Saturday, right?" Sue nodded, and Mary continued to share her plan. "Excellent. So, tomorrow morning, you and I will go and deposit the money in the bank. Then I'll ask a colleague to come over as backup. I think if you confidently tell Alex that you absolutely cannot support him financially anymore, he won't insist or try to pressure us in any way. Of course, ideally, we shouldn't bring him home, but meet somewhere in a cafe. After that, personally, I see two options. Either immediately shock him with the news that his scheme has been exposed, but then his reaction could be unpredictable. He might even resort to violence. A more interesting game would be to have a little fun. Lead Alex on, for example, lie that the money was urgently transferred for the treatment of a child seen on television. I think that news would be a terrible blow to him. What do you think?" A malicious fire of anger blazed in Susan's eyes. "Mom, I have another idea. Remember how we had some novelty banknotes lying around somewhere, the ones they gave you as a joke for your birthday at work? I suggest we give Alex a so-called wad of fake money. I think he won't check the authenticity of his loot in front of us. And when he gets back to his lair with them, I wonder how he'll justify himself to his accomplices. I seriously doubt Beth will believe him if he says he got exactly these papers from me. She thinks I'm a fool. I think Alex is guaranteed to have problems." Mary approved her daughter's plan. "That's a brilliant idea. I wouldn't have thought of that. But I still absolutely don't want to see him in our apartment. Let's meet him somewhere on the way to the dacha, and you'll give him the supposed money, and we'll go to the dacha. Even if there's no work there now, except maybe filling the tank with snow, I think it will be easier for us in the fresh air. Physical labor will help distract us from our thoughts." Susan agreed and immediately became sad. "Mom, we probably need to change the locks first thing, just to be safe. Remember, I gave Alex a set of keys for both the apartment and the dacha, just in case?" The woman immediately replied, "Good girl, daughter. You're thinking straight. I'll call Victor right now and ask for his help." While Mary was arranging things with her colleague, Sue watched with unexpected joy how sweetly her mother's cheeks blushed during what seemed like a completely serious, not romantic conversation. Let at least she be lucky in love, the woman thought. Mom deserves to have a holiday on her street too. Otherwise, I can't understand where the justice in life is. Victor didn't take long to get to his colleague's apartment, and soon he was dealing with the task at hand. Stealthily observing the working man and her mother, Sue clearly noted that there was a strong mutual liking between them. Victor didn't refuse dinner in the hospitable apartment, nor a trip to the dacha together the next morning. Mary briefly, without details, told him about the upcoming event, and the man said sternly, "The idea is excellent. But still, for formality, I would also file a police report about fraud based on trust. At least, maybe these swindlers are wanted for other crimes. And besides, even if they aren't brought to justice, at least it will get on their nerves. And that's something." After Mary saw the guest out, Sue asked her mother, "Did you notice how Victor was looking at you?" The woman visibly blushed. "Oh, don't say that. We're just friends. Although, of course, I like him very much. But I've somehow gotten used to living without a man in my space. I even remember with horror what it was like, constantly ironing shirts, searching for matching socks, cooking in huge pots. Such a regime of self-sacrifice is only possible when there is love or strong financial motivation. Why are you looking at me like that, daughter?" Alas, but in the modern world, financial support is excellent fertilizer, you could say. You can grow a perfectly happy partnership on it. Forgive me for the gardening comparison. Sue even laughed. Mom, I thought you were a romantic lady, but you're a practical and rational gardener. However, I would strongly advise you to take a closer look at Victor. Of course, my intuition isn't great, but he seemed very pleasant, sincere, and in love with you." The women meticulously thought through all the details of the upcoming prank on the exposed swindler, who didn't yet know about his failure, and Susan began typing a message. Alex's reply was not long in coming. "Can't wait for tomorrow. I want to see you so much. Kisses, my love. Can't wait to see and hug you." "And we can't wait either," Mary chuckled. "This meeting will definitely be unforgettable." Susan, Mary, and Victor met beforehand. The man told them what he had managed to find out through acquaintances. No work on cars was being done in the burned-down garages. This argument was important so that none of the fraudsters would think that someone from Beth's family had told Sue about the deception. The fighters for justice arrived at the bus stop where the transfer of the fake money was supposed to take place a little earlier. But Alex, who anticipated a big score, also arrived early. He had to park his car a little further away to avoid potential disputes and conflicts with traffic police. Alex almost ran to his waiting fiancée and her companions. After greeting the stranger warmly, the groom pressed his lips to his fiancée's cheek, kissed Mary's hand, and, fortunately, didn't notice how the women winced. Then, Alex received a small package from Sue's hands. "Darling, here's everything Mom and I managed to collect. We simply have nowhere else to get more, unless we put the apartment or the dacha up for sale." Alex again rushed to kiss Mary's hand. "Mary, I appreciate your kindness, but you don't need to make such sacrifices for me, especially since with this sum I can satisfy the main part of the claim. Listen, maybe I should write you a receipt." Summoning all her self-control, the woman replied, "What are you saying, Alex? What kind of receipts can there be between close people? You are going to become part of our family. I intend to entrust you with my most precious possession, my only daughter. What are some money compared to her? Consider this our common family budget, and for the sake of getting you out of trouble, we are ready to give everything we have. Money is just paper compared to your health. And by the way, ours too. In the notorious 90s, you could even lose your life for smaller debts. We are absolutely not willing to do that. So go, settle with those bastards, and come to the dacha. We'll light a bonfire, boil tea in the kettle, and relax after all these worries." Alex hugged his fiancée, shook Victor's hand, and hurried to his car. Susan and Mary, without speaking, sighed in unison. They had acted out the invented revenge scene with such precision as if they had held numerous rehearsals. Mary giggled. I can imagine the shouting that will start when those who decided to fleece us find a wad of fake money instead of real. Sue supported her mother. Exactly. It's a pity we won't be able to see their faces. Victor, watching his amused companions, advised, Well, shall we go to the dacha or to the police station to file a report on this gang? Mary, exchanging glances with her daughter, voiced their common decision. Of course, to the dacha. We discussed this situation all night, looked for similar cases online to understand the prospects of punishing these fraudsters who relied on trust. The results weren't very encouraging. Sue transferred the money to a private individual voluntarily, without coercion. Proving that this Alex deceived my daughter about his difficult situation will be almost impossible. So we'll just watch and see what this Alex says when he discovers that the bills are fake. The call from Alex came almost immediately after the trio of inventive Avengers reached the dacha plot. Susan took the call, putting the smartphone on speakerphone. Everyone prepared to listen to the hapless swindler. Susie, darling, something unpleasant has happened. Did they give you the money at the bank? Sue tried to put a note of anxiety in her voice and asked, Yes, I got the money at the bank branch, the one on the ground floor in the next building. What happened? Alex continued to clarify. Susie, didn't you and your mom count the money? The woman became indignant. Of course. What if there was some technical error, a malfunction of that machine that counts money? We counted everything meticulously. Then, as I told you, I put all the bundles in the package I gave you today. Oh, of course we counted it. First we asked them to seal it with paper. They refused, but they gave us bank rubber bands. Then Mom went to work. She found a part-time job to still get us a wedding gift. Oh, I just remembered. I did go into a store. A hysterical note appeared in Alex's voice. Sue, did you leave the package in a locker? The woman's indignation was almost genuine. Alex, what, do you think I'm completely idiotic? I carried the package with me inside my jacket so no one could get to it. I bought some candy because I always crave sweets when I'm stressed. Then I went home. The interrogation continued. Could anyone else have gotten into the apartment? Who is that man who was with you and Mary today anyway? And wasn't he at your place after you got the money? It was becoming increasingly difficult for Sue to remain calm, but she kept up appearances, proving that she hadn't wasted her time in the school drama club and had even received several honorary certificates. Well, actually, my mother trusts Victor completely. He's her colleague. He was at our place, but he didn't have access to the package, if that's what you're implying. Alex, you're scaring me. What happened? Alex lost patience and flared up. What happened? What happened? Instead of real money, the package contained novelty banknotes and rubber papers. So I'm trying to figure out where, at what point, the real banknotes were swapped. Come on, think hard. How could that have happened? You understand how much depends on this. Who could have had access to the package? Sue was already sobbing with laughter, but she continued to play along with the brazen swindler who had fallen into the trap. Oh, how awful! How could this happen, darling? Listen, maybe you could bring me this package now, and I'll take it to the police. Let them take fingerprints, as they call it. How is it? Sweat and grease marks like in the series. They'll identify and determine who else touched the package besides me. There was no sound from the speaker. It seemed Alex was consulting with Beth and Arthur through gestures, and after a few seconds he said, Listen, I tore the package to shreds out of anger and confusion. Now probably there won't be any traces other than mine. It's unlikely the police will be able to help, even if they do. It will take them ages to investigate this case. I have to pay the debt. I promised to settle as much as possible today. My God, what am I going to do now? Susan, wiping away her tears, answered coldly, I'll tell you what to do, Alex. Forget me forever and don't even think about getting revenge by doing nasty things, keeping in mind that I will go to the police after all and write a report about attempted fraud. Do you think it was so difficult to check if you worked in the burned-down garage? You didn't even show up there once. So goodbye, Alex. Thank you for the lesson. Keep the money I transferred to you for your efforts. You courted me for a long time, inventively. You earned it, I guess. At the end of her speech, Sue's nerves began to give way, and she quickly hung up, not listening to any of Alex's justifications, who had started shouting that she had simply misunderstood him. With a calm heart, the woman blocked the number of her now definitely ex-fiancé and suggested to her mother and Victor, "I think we did a great job. We have a reason to celebrate the victory of justice and my liberation." Mary added modestly, "Daughter, there's another reason. Victor and I have decided to get married." At her mother's wedding, Sue met Owen, the nephew of the elegant groom. Their relationship developed with Mary's full approval. Sue, who now relied unconditionally on her mother's opinion, allowed herself to trust a man again. It wasn't very easy, but life went on, and there was no reason to isolate herself in her loneliness because of the scoundrels she had encountered. 6 months later, Owen proposed to Sue, and she accepted. The story with the treacherous Beth and the swindler Alex remained in the past. The only person the woman would like to see happy again was Olivia, who had helped them get out of a nearly hopeless situation.